guys, how's it going? I feel like we're kind of winding down here. I just wanted to say it's so nice to actually be at an event with a lot of people and talking in person. It feels like it's been a minute since we've done that. But it's also been a minute since Ben and I have started working together, and I think one of the things that's been awesome about getting to know you, Ben, is that you are a very interesting person, right? So I have spent my entire career on the agency side, and I think what's really interesting about your perspective, and as we start to talk about what that means for meaningful mind share, you've got a really diverse background. Can you sort of just talk a little bit about how your background has informed kind of your view of the media landscape and the different tensions and challenges that you're seeing?
Yeah, so, I've made my way in a very unconventional way from PR to social to creative, and then most recently into media. And the negative was every step along the way, people said, you're not qualified for this job. But the positive is once in the job, you get to pull that experience in the range, and those experiences then inform your outlook in a more holistic way. And, all of that has culminated to now at Wolverine, where I get to oversee, marketing of a portfolio of brands, driving to DTC growth. What it allowed me to do was really, start shaping what a real holistic marketing plan looks like. And, when we went through the pitch process, the challenges weren't media, the challenges were business and what media channels unlock the right results. And that was a huge part of why you guys performed so well. And ultimately connecting what we were doing with marketing and media to kind of that meaningful nature of what is a brand, but a representation of our feelings about it. And then there are all sorts of products and categories you can fulfill within that. But it all should be omni-channel and channel agnostic to a certain extent. And that can evolve and that can change every month. But as long as you are looking at things like truly holistically, it builds better results.
So I think that's really interesting, Ben. You bring up a couple of different things there, right? There's this notion of, I think, elevating conversations from just media conversations to marketing conversations, and you mentioned that being a big part of the pitch. And there's this sort of challenge that everything has to be omni-channel right now. But, right, at the same time, we've got to balance this with trying to capture audiences who are bombarded with more messages than they've ever been bombarded with in their entire lives. And at the end of the day, right, it's about human behavior and trying to capture attention. How do you sort of balance needing to take care of, brand fidelity and protect your mission and the ethos of all of those things that are precious, while also doing things that are really channel specific? And I'll give you an example, right? I think back in the day, we probably all remember clients would come to us with a brief and they would say, hey media team, hey creative team, can you guys go work on this together? Then I think that very quickly evolved to, hey guys, it's not just a brief, it's actually, we're gonna do a social campaign. And now it's not just we're gonna do a social campaign, it's I need to do a TikTok campaign, I need to be in the metaverse, and I've got to do it tomorrow. How do you sort of balance that tension with needing to be in those environments and knowing that that's a great place to be to capture attention and to capture that meaningful mind share, but balancing that with a portfolio of brands like Wolverine and what's right for one brand or what's right for the whole portfolio?
I think the most important thing that we have stopped doing is saying no and why. Like, we all get to, I'm guessing everybody in this room is not the ultimate say-so, final 100% say for any brand, any company. We all have, even if you're a CEO, you have a board. And what we need to do more often is go back and say, I'm not answering that TikTok brief. We don't even have a social strategy. We don't have an audience segmentation. I realize TikTok matters to you, and it might matter to your audience, but doing an innovative thing for a moment does very little to build a lasting brand. When you talk about all of the messages we are bombarded with, some research I did while I was at MediaCom before I left, we are absorbing 5 to 7 times the amount of ad messages we did as recently as 10 years ago. Your brain cannot adapt fast enough, and our brains are amazing, to process, absorb, retain everything that brands are saying. And so what ultimately we see wins time and time again, and Byron Sharp, got up and spoke about this just very recently, is consistency. Iconic brands are not iconic because of random tactics. They are iconic because of consistent and repeated behaviors building towards a specific sense of emotion and perception of a brand over time. You and I have joked about relationships and the kind of corollary. If you show up randomly on a date with a Ferrari, that's cool, and somebody may be interested in that. But if the next day you go back to picking them up in a Camry or Honda or whatever, you don't get everlasting credit for having a Ferrari for a day. And we talk about marketing like it's that. Like, oh, well, I took you in a Ferrari one time 6 years ago, so pay me Ferrari prices. And it just doesn't work that way. We have to focus on building repeated consistency. So if we do only show up in front of somebody for 2 seconds, that 2 seconds is part of a meaningful journey that has happened for years.
I think that's interesting. I think one of the complexities, though, for you in particular, Ben, and for you in your role, right, is Wolverine as a whole is this big portfolio. Does that element of consistency, do you think, apply to big brands that are well established as much as it does to smaller brands? Or is there something to say for smaller brands to say, you know what, maybe you do need a Ferrari moment?
So I think that the important thing to remember is if you have established what your brand means, to whom it needs to mean something, you can invest in moments that go above and beyond. But the challenge we have when we get into this place of, I need an out-of-home idea, I need a TikTok idea, I need whatever, is that they tend to get divorced from whatever the core brand identity or brand strategy is. As recently as 8 years ago, the average client had 3 agencies. Now the average brand has 7 agencies. You have 7 people trying to make a mark and do what they think is best, but the problem often becomes what they may genuinely believe is best is not given the context of what the other agencies are trying to do or what the brand is trying to do. And it puts everybody at a place of, weakness. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at our portfolio, what we try to do is set up operational structures that can ensure consistency. Do we all understand what an audience segmentation is supposed to look like? And that audience segmentation should influence every agency the same way. Do we all understand what our brand ethos is, what our North Star is, what our visual style is? You can see an Apple ad, not even see a logo or a product, and just kind of be like, oh, it's baked into my mind that that's an ad for an Apple. And you need to have all of that groundwork set, and then you need to have the operational things in place. And then a brand like Merrill, who's our biggest brand, can have the ability to flex into channels that other brands can't, or to do something different than a smaller brand like Keds could do. But it is rooted in a foundation of rigor and operational structures that provide for consistency, and it's not sexy. Talking about who gets to sign off on what, having brand guidelines that actually mean something, right? But that is how great brands are built and how iconic brands are built.
I think, it's funny that you talk about the rigor behind a lot of this, because it definitely is the operational backbone that gets overlooked a lot, but it is the thing that binds everything together. How important do you think it is for creative and media to be sort of inextricably linked, right? Because when you're talking about these things like brand guidelines and the fidelity and knowing these things, those are lanes that have often been inherently creative, right? And we're talking about bringing them into a media world, and we're talking about making sure that we carry them into things like outdoor, right? How important do you think it is to link those two together?
So having the benefit of worked at creative agencies, and while I am not claiming to be one of the best in the world, the agencies I've worked at are phenomenal, and the people around me have been phenomenal. But at creative agencies, I can tell you, like, we never got the business results of our campaigns. We saw the awards, we flew to the south of France, we drank a lot of champagne when our creative was interesting, but we never saw the hard number business results. On the media side, we do. Likewise, on the media side, we have access to far more data that informs our decision making. And when you only have TV, print, and radio, you can come up with one creative idea very simply. But the fact of the matter is now, when you have a 20-channel plan, and like we talk about social, but we all know that, you know, TikTok is different from Instagram, is different from LinkedIn. And when we talk about out of home, right, a national out of home plan is different than a regional one, right? And so when we think about that stuff, my perspective these days is everything should actually start with your media strategy, right? As far as after you have your brand principles and your audience, right? But the reason it should start there is your creative agency should know where everything needs to run, what metrics it's being measured against, before they develop a creative idea. And, you know, there was that, you know, famous quote, give me the freedom of a tight brief. Mm-hmm. But that is the thing creatives are missing. And when their creative gets ripped apart after the fact, of course they're gonna be sensitive. But if we can do a better job of arming everybody in advance, and then allowing creative to paint the picture on the canvas we give them, creative will be better, it'll be more effective, and we'll have the ability to not have to excuse performance with, well, this creative wasn't really meant for here.
I think that's interesting. I think, you know, talking about creative fit for certain spaces, and I know this is one of the topics that's come up a lot today, but when you look at the outdoor space, it really is full funnel. And I know we talked at lunch about how we hate the traditional purchase funnel, but the fact that it's actually addressable now, and it really is that sort of last bastion of true viewability, makes it, I think, incredibly special, and I think a place where those opportunities for the magic of creative and media to come together, it's a great place to start.
I am, you know, oddly, for somebody who technically, my job is to drive the digital and DTC growth of our company, I'm oddly bullish on out of home, and that's not because I'm sitting here, right? You know, one of my coworkers who now works with me at Wolverine, who worked with me in the past, Lance, is sitting in the audience, and when we worked and led the Dell transformation, one of the big things we pushed was that we needed to be out of home in major cities. And the reason was twofold. One, out of home placements are almost like retail spaces in the sense that they can give a premium nature to a brand. There is scale that impacts us mentally and emotionally in ways that digital, which is so small, just doesn't do. And we've seen the statistical studies that lift awareness, perception metrics tied to out of home. And, you know, as we look at shaping everything we do, it's really important that we think about that ad in Soho on Thompson Street. For some people, is going to be an awareness ad because they're not in shopping mode. But for other people, it's going to be a conversion ad because they've actually been looking at shoes for the past 6 days, and just seeing that model, seeing that brand is that last second reminder to push you into the top 2 or 3 in their unaided awareness and actually make them go into a store and buy you, or make them go on their phone and go to your website. And that is a massively interesting part of, honestly, all advertising right now, but out of home in its proximity power to some of the stores where you are.